one that, when we talk to our grandkids when we're older, what were we doing during this time? Well, we were spreading the good word about currency and Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah.
So I think legacy is important with it too, somewhat, in terms of being a part of it.
Hello and welcome back to the Bitcoin Cash podcast. This is episode 15, Peter versus Spencer Schiff and crypto content creation following Bitcoin Cash on its rise to global reserve currency. Today is Sunday, the 25th of April, 2021, and today I have with me on the show Ryan Giffen. Ryan, how you doing, man?
Doing great, Jeremy. Thanks for having me on.
How'd you come to be on the show? How are you involved in Bitcoin Cash? Give us a bit of a rundown.
Well, I think part of the reason we're jumping into this video today is because you saw my Bitcoin story, and a lot of what brought me into just Austrian economics in general is Peter Schiff. I used to really look up to Peter Schiff. I thought he was our generation's Milton Friedman or a great Austrian voice. So I always had this. I was always drawn towards kind of free market economics in general, just because growing up through the financial crisis, I'm living in South Florida here. We were really damaged by the overvaluation of home prices that were caused by the boom bust cycle that the Keynesian economists always kind of propel with their manipulation of interest rates and flooding of the money printing machine. So that brought me into that realm, and then that kind of brings us to how I found Peter and missed on Bitcoin for a number of years. And, it's kind of funny to look at the crypto market and see someone like Peter Schiff, who's rather intelligent, still missing on Bitcoin. We still have to get those people in, and then we still have to get them in to understand what Bitcoin Cash is and explain that whole civil war. So that's kind of a little preface of who I am and how I got interested into cryptocurrency and Bitcoin.
Yeah, we got a lot of work to do, that's for sure. And I suppose that's going to be the theme of this episode today, is that because it is such a complicated thing, right, in terms of Bitcoin Cash, cryptocurrency, money, there's a lot to know, and you can miss it by just this much, even just being slightly off. It's kind of like you could be 90% right makes you 100% wrong type of idea, right? So I think, that's what we're going to be looking at today. So, got to start with the price as usual. Least interesting thing, but always first off the mark, just for historical purposes. Today, Bitcoin Cash back out of the top 10, down to number 11, 770 USD, and a little bit down against BTC as well. Now down to 67 to 1 BCH. I see you've made some price predictions on your channel, so I would guess you're bullish on Bitcoin Cash. But how often do you follow the price? Is that a big feature for you?
I do. Well, a lot of it, and I just published a video last night intending to sell a lot of my cryptocurrencies in this bubble, and because that's what cryptocurrency does. It runs up into bubbles. But it doesn't really bother me, the shorter term price movement, and I feel like my calculation on price is pretty accurate. And I think my Bitcoin Cash price prediction is lower than a lot of other people's. I've heard 5,000, 10,000, 30,000. I see it really going to 3,000, which I think to some people is still rather disappointing because we're not making a new all-time high, right? And it very well might do that, but I think we're still working on changing the sentiment in Bitcoin Cash, and I think we're still working on. It's really why I'm getting involved. Like, I think part of the problem that Bitcoin Cash faces in terms of sentiment, it's almost like a political election where we get seen as throwing so much negativity just at Bitcoin, and it turns a lot of people off. But there is a real community here trying to do real things. And I think you do have to explain the Civil War, if you will, talk about it. But I don't know, I wanted to make that point, that I want to be part of the conversation that is helping a positive brand value towards Bitcoin Cash. Would you agree with that? That sometimes we fall into this thing where we're like in the election and maybe we don't talk always good about what we're doing, but we just talk negative about the competition?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I definitely, it's funny you use those words civil war, because that's how I think of it as well too. It is, quite amazing because, like, for being such a sort of libertarian, non-aggression type of thing, and it's amazing that it is like a literal war in the terms of the hash rate and everything like that. But there's been no shots fired, and yet it's still one of the most hotly contested, like conflicts of the last few years potentially, right? And it is over the fate of the global financial system. So it's a very real, like, the word war is definitely appropriate, but there's no guns involved, so it is actually still very true to the sort of libertarian, like, anarchist type philosophies, right? Where it's a war of ideas. So I absolutely love that, and I think, all's fair in love and war, right? So if BTC are going to, be censoring us or trying to say we're a scam or whatever, like, that's up to them. That's fine. That's their, strategy. And our strategy in response has to sort of, look at changing the narrative a little bit. And I think for the Bitcoin Cash side, it was obviously unfortunate that we ended up having to shift off the main branding, because branding is super powerful. But as time has gone by, I've become more amenable to the idea that actually it's a really good thing, because typically, like, one of the big problems in a cryptocurrency is the distribution of coins, right? And that's why Bitcoin always has been one of the premier ones, because the coin supply was, like, it wasn't as much pre-mined or anything. Obviously, some people were early miners, but since cryptocurrency was brand new, it was people who were passionate and involved and interested in stuff that got in, as opposed to later on where they had coins where people have figured out every variety of scam that they could run or hype or whatever. And so Bitcoin Cash inherited that from Bitcoin, and then had a bit of a reawakening where then people who still didn't kind of get it, or who own some or whatever, they've probably all sold out. And so now it is people who are getting on board with it really as that peer-to-peer cash will be, will be investing in it at this point, even if it's, lower relative to BTC. So I think as well, it also has clarified the mission a little bit, because now there's just no question really about it. Like, obviously, Bitcoin is busy becoming bank coin or settlement coin or digital gold or whatever. And so people who are interested in that price hype and stuff, they're going to that. But if you ever want to sort of change the narrative again away from Bitcoin Cash, it's going to be very hard to do. It's literally in the name. It's like, it's cash, man.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm trying to possibly get more in branding, at least on Instagram and in my business. Like, I'm really trying to push people towards using this as a currency. Like, I pay my my graphic artist in it. If I'm, like, paying for parking for someone, I can usually talk the guy into taking that rather than taking cash.
Yeah.
And on my website, I'm using BitPay, which isn't quite where I want to be, but in the e-commerce world, I think we're still having to use a custodian. When people come into my shop and buy things, I can use the Bitcoin register, but it's actually, like, making it a real usable thing. And it does work great. And I think, I don't know how long, and people do this for a while, how long you can hang out in the BTC camp and just find, like, why can't they get past 1 megabyte? Like, this whole religion around 1 megabyte, I think at some point will be turning people off. Like, it doesn't, at this point, and where technology is, where hardware is, where bandwidth is, into saying that you're going to decentralize your project by going above 1 megabyte, like, it's just, I don't know how anyone buys that.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't think they're very likely to change it up in any way, because I feel like it's just become too much a core part of the ideology, and whatever influences they have in that community have invested so much in that narrative. If that sort of tried to, like, the only scenario I can see where momentum would be created to lift their block size limit would be if Bitcoin Cash is just spiking up, and the flippening looks like it's really on, and it's going to just completely knock out Bitcoin. Then suddenly it would be a crisis of, oh, what are we going to do? But at that point, it kicks in too late. Once the crisis mentality kicks in, if the momentum's already shifted, that's it, you're finished, right? Because then things just degenerate into chaos, because then everybody has a different idea. We should do this, we shouldn't do this, da-da-da, and all the time the people who are on the fence, it's going to be easier for them to just switch sides than it is to sort of rally around the core and kind of fight back, right? So that's another reason that I think the whole fork and being in the minority part of the fork was actually a really good thing, because it proved that Bitcoin Cash community is so passionate that they don't care. They will, you know, they will stick with it even against the odds, which was like the original Bitcoin community against you know, the rest of the world, against fiat currencies. But in the BTC community now, there's going to be so many defectors. The second the winds change, that's going to be it for them, I think. And yeah, it's just true that you can only.
I look forward to that.
Yeah, it's coming. You know, we're getting there, I think. And yeah, like here's one thing about it. Like you're saying, if people can actually use it, ultimately that's what gets people's attention. You know, the same as you, I try and encourage people to use it like a little bit, and there's only so much hype that BTC can sustain, where they're on a forum and they're all saying, oh, digital gold, yeah, it's great, or whatever. But pretty much that argument just gets blown to smithereens if you're actually just sitting with someone and you're like, hey, pay me back for this beer, and or, you know, whatever, and you just send them $2 and just the Bitcoin.com wallet. I love the little green notification that has that it pops up. That's perfect. It's just like, bam, money received.
I can't tell you, in the past couple of weeks, like I've had so much fun with it. I've probably opened over 50 wallets, but where you can just copy and send the link and send the currency, and people just open up and get a Bitcoin wallet. And it's funny, like some of my friends don't even really invest, but like I'm just telling them about this magical internet money. Like, you know, you can't get like overly technical, but you can kind of explain like the power of not needing a custodian, and but they're legitimately like on the phone, like it moves price, and when the price goes down, I try to explain to them, like, when you go to the gas station to fill up your car and it's costing you more in dollars, you're not watching your dollars go down in value and getting mad at your dollars. But and that's happened recently, because I was handing out a lot of Bitcoin Cash. I was at a wedding about a week and a half ago, and then like this week the price like pulled off maybe like 20-30%. Like, oh, Ryan, you know, they don't understand the volatility because they don't really invest, but you try to explain like that everything's pegged to the dollar, so you don't see assets moving against it and actually losing value.
Yeah, and it's interesting because with that volatility, I've found with new people that I've introduced, I've been surprised that actually a lot of them have said they get some, and well, there's either one or two ways it goes. Either the price goes up or it goes down, right? If it goes up, then they're kind of like, oh, this is pretty cool. You know, my $5 is now $5.20, and they're thinking, wait, this is good. You know, that'll get somebody to look, wait, what's going on here? And then if it goes down, I mean, yeah, maybe people can be a bit depressed, but I haven't seen actually as much of that recently. If they just have a small amount, or they sort of are over the idea that, okay, maybe this is going to kick off, then if it goes down, they think, oh yeah, I can actually buy a little bit more of this now. So yeah, sure. I've definitely seen people in that mindset, and I think it was just this. I don't know what your thoughts are, but on this crazy, like this whole trend since basically the middle of December, where just suddenly after years of being, you know, flat, Bitcoin Cash just started taking off, and it seems like the growth has slowed down a bit. But I think in my mind what's happening is that like noise.cash spread around to a lot of people, read.cash and whatever, but maybe that's tailed off a bit. Maybe there's a bit less of those, there's still a lot, right, but of those 1 cent tips and stuff, and more just now people are, for whatever reason, suddenly got over this barrier of, oh yeah, we can actually use this as cash. Because if you give someone a transaction like that, then they show up, you know, as one little data point in this set of transactions. But then a couple weeks later, they buy some, and then that's another one. And then a few weeks after that, you know, they send it to somebody else, and then that's another. And so it takes like a long time, but the snowball just builds up.
Sure. So yeah, the more wallets you have, the more people that have money in there, and the more they find the utility in it. I mean, definitely noise is a huge reason, probably still, for a number of transactions. I couldn't tell you how many, but you know, and part of my reason of handing out Bitcoin Cash, I think Roger Ver said like it's like being a Bitcoin Johnny Appleseed, like planting all these trees everywhere, and and letting them blossom, and spreading it out there. So, and that's why I really, in my own community here, I want to get more involved of creating this little, realm of economics where people use it and start adopting it and started making it feel like some sort of native currency, even though I'm in the United States where the dollar is so powerful. But I mean, imagine, I think of people that are in countries with, far worse currencies than the dollar, this being so important, and really falling in love with this currency.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's probably, there's also just been, a bit of an information barrier there as well too, just because a lot of the information about Bitcoin previously has been in English, right? As well, like the white paper was first published in English, and all the early community, a lot of that was focused on English. Software development tends to be done in English for a lot of different reasons. So I think for all those reasons, it hasn't quite found its niche yet. Like there's been a lot of good work in South America recently, looking at that, but maybe some communities in Africa or different things like that, where it can really just take off, but it's just has to get to those key couple of influencers in the community who start, promoting it or spreading it around. And there have been some videos that I've seen of people talking about Bitcoin Cash in Africa and so on, and that's just amazing. That is genuinely like world-changing stuff. So the other like stats that I usually check in on here is the USD cent per day, because now Bitcoin Cash is doing more transactions. It's kind of, to me, the next big thing is the more actual like value moving across the network. And BTC has just been at absolutely like spiking up to more than 67 billion. This was with the transaction fees going through the roof. So I think maybe a lot of, big holders were panicking or sending around their coins, a lot of back and forth in the market. What's been your thoughts on the recent fee crisis in BTC?
Yeah, I mean, overall, just the trend of the market, like last bull run, I think Bitcoin dominance went down to nearly 30%. And a lot of that does correlate with the fees that are associated with it. And speculation in the smaller coins and the mania and all that. But yeah, I just saw a funny tweet yesterday. It's like, I just paid $30 to send $25 of Bitcoin. Yeah, we're really changing the world, like this is what's going to dethrone the global financial system. But then we should probably spend some time to and I've tried to be fair to Lightning. I really have. And I just don't at this point see it as necessary. And I think Bitcoin Cash is the best use case for that, in terms of, why are you trying to create these off-chain solutions right now when, I don't know, when opening a node and having a watchtower and all these complicated things. I've always used the term in business and life, like complexity is the enemy of execution. Yeah. Like trying to get people to use this as currency, and when you create this complex system where it's always in 18 months away beta. Again, I've tried to be fair to it, but where do you see the real shortfalls in Lightning, and where do you see, like, I know one of the things they talk about is you're using a custodian at this point, but they're saying some of these wallets will be non-custodian too. Have you given Lightning a fair shot?
Well, to be honest, I've never even like fired it up and stuff. I will have to do that and give it a go. I sort of agree with you. I think it's flawed on way too many fronts. So the complexity barrier is so high, like even as me, somebody who's, technical, I'm a professional software dev and I understand Bitcoin, in great detail and everything like that. But I've had a bit of a look at some of the Lightning stuff. This is so complicated, right? The more layers and layers of everything at the technology level is just, it's not like feasible, just with each additional level of complexity, the implementation cost just becomes exponentially higher, as you were saying. So, and once you think about that expanded across an ecosystem, it just doesn't make any sense. And then obviously from a sort of ideological or fundamentals perspective, it doesn't make any sense either, because if you're using like custodial services to use your Lightning Network, well, that doesn't work, and that's just a result of the high technical complexity of people who have figured out the workaround is to basically just go back to a central solution. But even if it was very decentralized, or they had all the hubs running or whatever, then even still in that case, you're not using the blockchain, and it's basically just a very dressed up version of the banking system. Again, sort of coming back to that narratives and community, philosophies and stuff like that, where if you're okay with that, well, you don't need Bitcoin, really. The only reason to have Bitcoin and Lightning Network and be excited about that versus the fiat currency system is that it might personally make you rich. It's not actually going to fundamentally change how people transact. And then even on top of that, it's like, well, even if there is maybe some sort of merit to Lightning Network, payment channels, that kind of thing, I don't think that's totally wrong. But even if you had that idea, like, you would need a lot more on-chain capacity before you could even run a global Lightning Network, right? In the original Lightning Network white paper, I think the founders, or not the founders, the progenitors, they said, like, maybe we need 133 megabyte blocks before we could have enough payment channels to have the whole planet using this kind of thing. So yeah, there's just so many fronts that it's busted on. And you can see the discussion on social media where people will say, but Lightning Network will solve everything. And then somebody replies to them like, hey man, send me a little bit of money on Lightning. And just like, it just instantly falls apart, right?
Yeah, and that's why, like, I really want to be fair to it, and I want to challenge my own arguments, and be able to say so confidently why Bitcoin Cash is my currency that I want to use, and your thesis that you put into all your shows here about it becoming the world reserve currency. Yeah, it challenge my ideas, and I think I like to see more of that come from the BTC camp too. I feel like it's, again, the censoring that's come from their side, the way they've kind of, how they took over our Bitcoin, all these things, not having these competition and ideas to play out. I find it strange. It opens this Pandora's box to all these conspiracy theories of, has Bitcoin been stolen? And I thought, have you seen the documentary that Cold Fusion did about the Bitcoin war? Fantastic. Everyone should watch that. Everyone should watch that. And I think if people, not that we have to fight a civil war with people, but if we just allow ideas to be heard and challenge your own, be willing to challenge your own ideas, I think we'll continue to grow this camp at Bitcoin Cash much larger.
Yeah, and I think you can even see that. You see posts a lot of the time which are people saying things that are, I mean, who knows, how authentic they are or whatever, but definitely people post up saying, oh man, I've been into Bitcoin, I got into it in 2018, I totally thought Bitcoin Cash was a scam, blah, 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 blah. And then something, something clicked with them, whether it was, I tried to send some and it was really high fees, or they talked to somebody in real life that they knew who was, back from the early days, or somewhere or another they get around to it and they tried Bitcoin Cash, and then they realize like they just need to try it a little bit, and then suddenly it's just so much patently better, and then they think, oh wait, and then the scales fall from their eyes, and suddenly all this like narrative that you'd heard the whole time is kind of false. But people don't tend to go the other way, because if you've got Bitcoin Cash and you're using it and it's working, why would you look at the fee? So I've got Bitcoin Cash and I can use Bitcoin, which is the same, but it costs $30 to send. Like, no thanks, man. That's pretty much it, right? So that's slow bleed.
And then how do you, so going further into it, how would you, because the biggest thing you knock against Bitcoin Cash, and to be fair, is the hash rate. So how do you see the Bitcoin Cash hash rate improving over time? And we're already starting to see it a bit, but how do you see this playing out? And is there, to any degree, lack of security and decentralization in the project due to the higher block sizes?
I mean, I don't really think so. Like, if you have a look at the hash rate, basically correlates with the price, right? Because it always fluctuates back to the equal profitability between the chains, and history has sort of shown that the hash rate follows the price rather than the price follows the hash rate. Before we had the forks, everybody was, that was an open question, right? People were actually debating that before the split happened as to what would happen, and it turned out to be that the price set the hash rate. So we've kind of got that historical info now, but there's not really a problem with security, because the only people, like the amount of Bitcoin mining on Bitcoin Cash now is like equivalent to whatever it was, I don't know, in 2013 or 2014 or something like that. It's still like you need loads of specialized gear to attack it if you were the government or whatever. And the only people who are in a position to attack it are the Bitcoin miners from BTC, but they have no incentive to do that. And we've seen that because they haven't, for the most part, there hasn't really been a lot of those shenanigans, and people are always, confused about that or asking about that. But somebody had a really good analogy I saw where they said, look, imagine that you were a mining company and you had a silver mine and a gold mine. And so what you did, they were both your mines and they were both profitable. But what you did was you took some of your gold mining employees and you sent them off to attack the silver mine and disrupt all their operations. And like, that makes no sense on so many fronts. It's like, they're both your operation. They're both making you money. Why would you divert from something that was working to destroy something else that was working, that were both in your control, right? So, yeah, as far as that goes, yeah, we haven't seen a lot of shenanigans like that. And yeah, and it seems, the hash rate is not proportional to the transactions either. So.
Yeah. And who knows? I mean, these guys are running businesses, right? They're not tied up in the philosophical debate. They're there to make money,
Yeah, exactly. They got to pay their employees. They got huge amounts of electricity. Yeah, they're not going to do anything stupid. And we've seen, there's Bitcoin SV as well. So different SHA-256 coins can coexist to a certain extent. So in that respect, I'm not worried about it. And as far as the block size going up and centralizing around the nodes, well, I think from the BTC side, they very heavily overvalue non-mining nodes specifically, because when in the white paper, Satoshi talks about nodes, but what people sometimes miss is that when he says that, he means mining nodes. He doesn't mean there was no non-mining nodes originally, right? And non-mining nodes are good. They definitely add to the network, but it's a question of what are you trading off, right? If you're massively restricting your pool of users who also add decentralization in terms of the amount of commerce, the geography, the marketing, their ability to spread it to other users, that's insanely valuable. But if you're just going to cut that off just to be focused solely on this one metric of non-mining nodes, then you're really shooting yourself in the foot. And for mostly, the more users you have, the more businesses that you will have, and the businesses will be the ones that will run the nodes because they've got an actual incentive to do that, because they need to support the network for the sake of their business. And for them, an extra $100 in a hard drive is like, you forget it, you blink and you miss that. If you're running any sort of business, right, you probably pay more to get a domain name or something, right? So yeah, I'm not really worried about that. Like, storage is cheap. It's not where the cost is, and trying to have everyone mining at home is just a fantasy on a $1 trillion plus network as BTC is and as BCH is going to be, I think, really. So yeah, that's kind of my my thoughts on those points.
Well, you brought them up on BSV. I get a lot of them coming around my channel, and they're not like anti-Bitcoin Cash, a lot of them, but they're always challenging because they're trying to go so much further, right? They're trying to go so much further than where Bitcoin Cash is at in terms of transactions can process, block sizes, all that. And my response to a lot of it, I'll start with me, is that I think they have a pretty toxic. I don't know. It just seems like a toxic place to be. There's been listed on some of the exchanges. Craig Wright is a pretty eccentric person to be related to. And then they try to propose this. When Bitcoin Cash, it can't right now currently scale to be the reserve currency of the world yet. But so for me, it's a philosophy of, do we grow to serve the current state of the network, or do we grow right now to become the most powerful network if the world were to change like that.
Yeah.
Is that how you see it, or how do you see the two?
Yeah, well, I think it's just fascinating that it's worked out this way, where you sort of have that spread of BTC, you know, being like no growth, and then BCH being like some growth, and then BSV being like all growth, you know. And to me, it's just like a life philosophy, right? Moderation in all things. And there's no need with the BSV like camp. Is there really any difference if Bitcoin Cash has 8 megabyte blocks or 800 megabyte blocks today? Like, there's not enough people using the network. So being focused on that and sort of trying to be like, look, our blocks are the biggest. It's like, it does not matter. Like, if you can have as much upward capacity as you want, the whole point of having a limit is, you know, historically in the early days of Bitcoin, when Satoshi put in the limit was to sort of stop spam or, you know, protect the network from being DDoS. But then it was set way above the actual usage. So it was just kind of like, well, we're going to have a limit because probably, you know, some sort of limit's a good idea, but we'll just keep it way ahead of usage so it never impacts the actual practical running of the network. And that's exactly the strategy that Bitcoin Cash still has. So this whole BSV stuff, it just seems like people who are very easily sort of led astray in a certain way, where it's like in BTC they always talk about, oh, the price is bigger, so the market has decided, therefore we are the best. And then in BSV it's, well, our blocks are bigger, therefore it's the best. It's like, no, that's not the important metrics. The important metrics are, do you have users who want to use it? Do you have commercial use cases? Do you have passionate people creating cool artwork and spreading the message of your community? That, to me, those are the metrics you should be looking at. So yeah, that's kind of why I'm not as big a fan of them.
I know. I love how you put that, and I loved in your last podcast just talking about the passion behind it, and it's by creating something that's easy and friendly to use, and I agree. Just, you know, things in moderation. You know, I think that's the right place to be, and I wanted to hear your feedback on that, because I get a lot of those guys coming around the channel and try to challenge it, and that's my response to them. I just don't understand why they're going so far off, and I have to ask, because it's so cool to be on a podcast talking about someone who's not like you, about the community, because there's not everyone else. You're always evangelizing the people around you, not usually learning, right? But what are your thoughts on Craig Wright? And I mean, are you glad? Are you happy about the fork that he left Bitcoin Cash, or do you have thoughts and opinions on it?
Yeah, I mean, well, the first thing I know about him, which I think is kind of amusing, is he's Australian, right? And so am I, and I think that just adds a little extra sort of dimension. Not that I'm the most patriotic person in the world, but I just found it interesting because he has a certain way of talking and a certain sort of attitude. You know, he tries to be basically a little bit sort of no nonsense kind of, you know, straight talker type of guy, right, in his mind. And that does come a bit from the sort of Australian approach to things, where, you know, maybe people are a bit more blunt or direct, or they're willing to swear a bit more, or they're not as, you know, sensitive to, you know, in a large crowd trying to sort of play to everyone kind of thing. And so he has a bit of that brash attitude, and I found that very interesting. But really what it comes down to is that he was a law professor, essentially. He knows a lot about law, and I mean, so do I. I studied law at university, right? So I sort of have some insight into that. I've never worked as a lawyer or anything, but I do know a bit about that. And a lot of the time when you look at his arguments or things that he says, he always tries to bring it back to being about law. He doesn't want to argue about technology or code, economics, community.
But isn't he Satoshi?
Well, that's right, exactly. Like, it just does not make the singlest bit of sense that Satoshi, who invented the world's most libertarian, you know, anarchist, free market type of thing, and then published the white paper for free to everybody and never complained about it ever, would then suddenly turn around and say, you know what I need? I need government intervention. I need the courts. I need, it's self-defeating on the face of it, really.
Yeah. I mean, he's sued just about everyone, right?
Yeah, it's just not a successful, like, the whole point of Bitcoin is that to a certain extent, it doesn't care about the law. It's a phenomenon that was just introduced that plays on more fundamental kind of aspects of human society. Obviously, there is going to be a bit of a legal element to there, especially as it grows and the courts figure out how we're going to do this and what are we going to use. But yeah, with like Craig Wright, and at the same, I wasn't too involved in the community at that time, but when they had the meeting in Bangkok before the split, he just basically rage quit when he went to that, because they say it's like techno babble, right? Where he knows enough about the code to make a lot of impressive sort of sounding arguments, but when he's sitting down talking to the actual devs of the node softwares or for various businesses or whatever, work on Bitcoin Cash every single day at the code level, obviously all his arguments just fall apart, because everyone's like, well, that's not right, that's not right, that's not right. So if you're talking to somebody who doesn't know, you can sort of say, well, the blockchain and the signatures and the validations and everything, and everybody like, well, it sounds authoritative, maybe it is right. But talking to somebody who knows, they're just going to see through it instantly, and that's pretty much what happens. So yeah, definitely, that's kind of my views on him.
Yeah, I want to get your input. Like I said, I don't get to talk to people as knowledgeable about Bitcoin Cash and the history than with you.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I appreciate that.
It's pretty cool. I mean, you can always come on for another podcast. We'll do a different topic, which just talk like, I don't know, Bitcoin Cash miscellaneous topics or something as well too. But yeah, that is part of the podcast, right? I really think it's good. We got to create more of that in the community, that kind of discussion. So yeah, but the topic we had for today, I thought would be good, because like you said, I saw your video where you were talking about Peter Schiff, and I've been a fan of his. I still am, with some reservations, but for a long time. So for people who don't know, Peter Schiff is, like you said, he's an Austrian kind of economist, and he runs a company that is really big on gold. He loves gold, and he's sort of saying we should go back to the gold standard and talking about the history of money and everything. He has a really popular podcast, and very famously in 2012 or 2013, because he's in that niche, a lot of people were writing into his show saying, get involved in Bitcoin, what's going on with that, and is this the future, and everything like that. And he looked at it and decided, no, it isn't. And he even has had a chat with Eric Voorhees, who is a very prominent, early Bitcoiner, who gave him some, and it was like in detail. He didn't just have a quick look at it and dismiss it. He did properly investigate it in his own way, and basically he said, look, no, this is a bubble, and he has his own reasons for that, and he's maintained that position almost unbelievably for nearly a decade now, more than 9 years. As Bitcoin has proven him wrong every single time, he's just doubled down on it's an even bigger bubble, forever. And it's strange, because as somebody who should understand the fundamentals of what makes a money and how money comes to exist in society and so on, he's missing it happening right in front of his own eyes, for real. And the twist in the tale, the plot twist, is that in the last year or so, his son, who's called Spencer, who is about 18 years old, he's 18 years old, he got it though. He got Bitcoin, or he's at least open-minded to cryptocurrencies. And so now the two of them have been having this kind of debate back and forth on Twitter, where Peter says basically, Bitcoin's a bubble and it's all going away. And his son kind of fires back with, no, but gold's terrible and Bitcoin is where it's at, right? So I thought it might be funny to do a bit of a review of some of their tweets and their arguments back and forth from a third-party perspective, as a bit of a boxing match was how I imagined it, for a bit of flavor. So I thought you might be a good guest for that, because you were already commenting on this dynamic.
Yeah. So going back to um, um, Peter, I read his book years ago. It was called How an Economy Grows and Why It Crashes. Have you ever read
Yeah,
that
I've
book?
read that. Yeah, it's with the fish,
It's
right?
fan-
It's the fish on the island and everything.
it's such a good representation on how an economy starts from this early man and then building money into society and then becoming this massive economy today. And like when my son gets old enough, like I'm going to read him this book. I want him to understand how an economy grows and why it crashes, and the issues with central economic banking and all these things. So like, and that's where I have this like I can't even like read that closely into Peter anymore, is because like he should know, and I don't know why he really doesn't. Like and I just see him more as this guy shilling his gold, and and standing on, and he's picked this mountain to die on. But it is so entertaining that someone as smart as he is, and missing Bitcoin for whatever reason, and then he can't even get his son on the same page.
Yeah.
A few doors down from him in the house. I wonder if they fight about it over dinner or whatnot, or maybe they're just giving some theater for everyone. Yeah. Because I wonder at what point, like, what will Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash's price be at when you actually convert him? Yeah. Because it took me years to get really converted too, and I feel like I'm not sure everyone's education process towards accepting this new internet magical money, it took me years to really invest in it. And a lot of that was because of Peter's fault. But have you found, what was your story into it before we jump into it? How long did it take you to accept it as an investable, what world-changing idea?
Well, that's the thing. I feel I'm not so unique in this respect, but definitely for me, it was pretty quick to get it. But I understand why people don't, right? The way I found Bitcoin was because in 2013, or maybe, I think it was 2013, or maybe it was even in 2012, but at a certain point, my mate said to me, he said, listen, the price of Bitcoin crashed. And I didn't know, that was the first time I'd ever heard the word Bitcoin, so I didn't know what it was, but I said, why'd it crash? that was my first question. He said, well, because the Silk Road went down. I said, what's the Silk Road? He said, well, it's a drug market that they were using to buy drugs. And I said, okay, we should buy some Bitcoin then. And the reason is because I knew, look, if the whatever this is, if the price has gone down because of this website, somebody will make another website and then it'll go back up. Sure. So I was immediately like sort of opportunistic to that, economic aspect to it. And so then shortly after that, I don't know, it wasn't like the next day or anything, but a couple months later, it was on my mind after he said that. And maybe I Googled it and looked up the price or whatever, but it was on my mind. And so then I looked it up and I started reading the white paper. And at the time, like I've been into computer programming for a very long time. So those sort of it wasn't, the reading the white paper wasn't too, over my head or anything like that. I was able to, understand and follow what was in there. So I read that, and then I was, sort of turning that over, but I was already thinking, look, I got to get some of this. And then that was then how so I went the other way. So then that's how I found out about Peter Schiff, and I found out about Mike Maloney and all those other, gold sort of based people, or like, I'm trying to remember what's his name. It's not Jeffrey Tucker, like those kind of people. Like there's a lot of these sort of Austrian economics type thinkers who are on various spectrums when it comes to Bitcoin in terms of their support or how quickly they jumped on board or whatever. So I found a lot of them through that, but I was already sold on Bitcoin, and I was already thinking, yeah, this is going to be the global reserve currency, right? And I started telling everybody, all my friends, all my family, and everybody was like, you are nuts, mate. So and so for me, it's more just a process of watching as it spreads around. Is like you're saying, at what point does it take to convince somebody? And that's actually quite a good thing. I think it's not. There's a lot of aspects to it that are seem like a scam, right? Where okay, it's to do with money and finance, and it's online, and there was a lot of sketchy dealings in the early days, and all of this sort of stuff. So if you're not a very forward-thinking and sort of freedom-minded person that believes in free markets and all that sort of stuff, it's very easy to just dismiss it. And so as a result, what you have is a process where the earliest people who could think the furthest ahead and extrapolate the trend from literally just Laszlo buying that pizza, right? That was the key moment where a transaction was made. As soon as that happened, it became a race as to who could understand that it would go from that to spreading around the whole globe. And so then all those early sort of people were piling in, right? So I was somewhat in the mix, of those kind of early days. And then from there, you have, as each new person comes on board, that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy where they make it more likely that it will become that way. And so people are on a bell curve in terms of how quickly they're going to clue in that, wait, this is actually going to happen. And there's always more people in that next segment because the previous people jump on board, and that makes it more convincing to the next group. And so, yeah, now we're in a situation where, like, I've been, saying Bitcoin's going to be the future for 8 or 9 years. And I know some people that I've been telling them for 8 years, and they've got, at some point they got on board. They said, wait, Jeremy's right. Actually, I gotta start listening. And then I have some people that I've been telling for 8 years, and they still think this guy's an idiot. There's no way it's ever going to happen. Even though, from my perspective, there's just been a landslide of evidence that I'm right pretty much constantly the whole time. But for some people, either they're not looking at that evidence, or they're busy with their life. People are busy, so it's hard for something to get on your radar and be as a focus to you. So, I can't remember what the original question was, but that's sort of my perspective on it.
Well, yeah, I just think it's like looking back on it, like when we're talking to our grandkids, they're going to be like, what were you doing when this 1,000-year event occurred, when humans changed their medium of exchange? Like, it was seashells, and it was gold, and it was, fiat, and now it's going to be cryptocurrency. I feel like it's that monumental. Yeah. And that's why it's so cool to get involved in like what you're doing and creating a podcast and, and trying to create e-commerce, like be part of this once in a 1,000-year event.
Yeah, really. Absolutely. And I definitely see it that way. In 50 years, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to have a tough time explaining to their kid or whatever, or their grandkids or something, where the kid says, oh, so granddad, why didn't you buy Bitcoin? And it's like, how do you explain? Like, you can't really rationalize that. It's like, well, I thought it was a scam. Or, like, people aren't going to say that their ego gets invested in, protecting the story. But the facts will be, if you didn't have any, you didn't have any. Like, if you've only got a small amount of Bitcoin cash, even though you were around at the time and you could have bought it, then it's like, well, did you not hear about it? Well, no, my friend told me about it, or were you not interested, or what, right? So, I mean, people do double down, right? And Peter is kind of a classic case of that, where people have a psychological desire to be consistent with their previous statements and actions, right? So, I mean, like, for instance, we've seen Mark Cuban, for instance. He was like sort of anti-crypto, this is never going to work. And now he's getting way on the hype train with NFTs and all this stuff. He still hasn't quite clicked on all of it, I think, but enough evidence has sort of trickled in that he's decided, look, the hit is going to be bigger to not change my mind than to change my mind. But, Peter is not at that stage yet. So let's take a look. So this is obviously a classic father versus son matchup. This is why I really enjoy this dynamic as well too, because I've argued with my dad. Like, a lot of people have argued with their parents, probably everyone on the planet. So everybody understands, there's a bit of a new versus old, old school versus new school. And like every generation in a family, you kind of inherit some of the things from your parents, and then you switch it up on other aspects too. So we've got here, I've done a little boxing profile for them. So Peter Schiff, 58 years old. He's the CEO of Euro Pacific Capital. He's a gold bug, loves that more than fiat currency, more than crypto. He's all about gold as the best. I've got his qualifying bout for this match was that he predicted the 2008 financial crisis. So that's obviously, puts him in the arena as understanding money and knowing what's going on. And then his exploitable weakness is that he only understands about 90% of how Bitcoin can be money. He's most of the way there, but he's not quite there. And then on the other side, we've got his son, Spencer Schiff. He's 18 years old. I didn't actually have a source for this, but I'm pretty sure he's studying economics at university. Maybe he's not. He can he can correct me on Twitter if he wants to. And he is a Bitcoin maximalist. So he's on the other. He's all in on Bitcoin. No other cryptos. Bitcoin is the one and only true way. Never forget about gold. Forget about fiat. All of that. His qualifying bout is that despite 18 years of exposure to his dad, he figured out that crypto has got something going on. So that's, you know, that's a pretty big achievement there. He easily could have just been, you know, following all the same logic. And his exploitable weakness is actually the same, that he only understands Bitcoin as money about 90%. It's a different 90% to his dad, but he's still missing 10% of the truth in there, in my opinion. So yeah, so it started off here. I don't know if this was the original earliest one, but Peter posted this tweet. Got here from September 7th, 2020. I think there was even some earlier sort of banter, but it started with, against my advice, my son at Schiff Spencer just bought even more Bitcoin. Whose advice do you want to follow? A 57-year-old experienced investor, business owner who's been an investment professional for over 30 years, or an 18-year-old college freshman who's never even had a job? And according to the Twitter votes, 80% of people were backing his son, right? Which is fair enough, you know. It's funny because this is already a bit of a flawed argument from Peter. Experience counts, but on the other hand, it counts less in terms of a disruptive technology, right? Because that's, everybody knows that. Like a 12-year-old probably is on the cutting edge more than a, you know, 80-year-old, right? So it was interesting that he was kind of like, the fact that I'm older means that I should understand something new faster, right?
But and something to point out against Peter is, you know, he's this amazing bubble identifier. Also the financial crisis, the dot-com bubble, any bubble he predicted. But he's such a great bubble predictor. He doesn't know how to capitalize on the bubble. Like he doesn't, you know. And in terms, even if he thought Bitcoin was a bubble, you know, I guess he just doesn't feel any need to ever speculate. Just hold gold and silver forever, and go from there. But I'm also upset that he kind of pushed me away from the stock market too, or the United States stock market, which just had an amazing 10-year run, and he just keeps on saying bubble, bubble, bubble. You know? Yeah. So a broken clock is right twice a day, and that's been his whole professional career.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, he hates that saying, but it's funny because against this Peter and Spencer, we're gonna get into it a little bit more. My opinions on each of their takes, you know, and the listeners can obviously decide for themselves, or check in on Peter and Spencer's, you know, Twitter, or get their perspectives too. But I think what Peter has is the same that I have, in terms of he's thinking in the long run. You know, he's thinking in 20 years. Are we still going to have the dollar? Is that going to be a bubble, or the stock market, or whatever? He's thinking, is something going to last that long and succeed on that kind of time frame? And he allocates his investments there. Like, it's sort of the same philosophy of, it's better to be 5 years early than 5 seconds late, right? And that's sure. So I think that kind of plays into his mindset, and that's both a strength and a weakness, right? On one hand, it lets him see, okay, these bubbles are coming, it's going to be a big issue, or whatever. But then on the other hand, it also means that with something like Bitcoin Cash, he doesn't have the quite, or with Bitcoin, I suppose, I don't know how savvy he is on Bitcoin Cash, probably not very, you know, as to how, you know, how things could develop, or how they could play out in that way. He doesn't really have that future sight. So we got round one of the boxing match, Peter versus Spencer. So Peter posted, the only reason at Elon Musk will exchange a hashtag Tesla for hashtag Bitcoin is that he wants the Bitcoin. The unit of account for the sale will still be dollars. None of the Bitcoin received will be used to pay expenses. Therefore, these are barter transactions. Bitcoin won't be used as money. And Spencer came in with the reply, when Bitcoin inevitably becomes a common unit of account, will you finally concede that you were wrong all along? So I've given this one, this is a 1-0 to Spencer. I don't think he's he's had the biggest like zinger here or anything. But basically, Peter is missing the mark, because if he understands, obviously, that there's three things to a money. It's got to be a medium of exchange, a store of value, and a unit of account. And he's kind of saying, well, Bitcoin's not a unit of account, therefore it's not money. But that doesn't mean it can't become money. And he even admits that this is a barter transaction. And really, the history of money is that something gets bartered, and then once it becomes the most bartered thing, that's just money by default, right? So he should understand that and be able to see that trend, because previously he said nobody even wants Bitcoin, it's just for speculation. But now with Elon accepting it, he's effectively silently conceded that point and moved the goalposts to now, well, somebody does want it, right? For Teslas, like it's not for nothing. So it's
Fortune 500 company.
Yeah, exactly. It's being bartered around. So the more it gets bartered, eventually it just becomes the money. That's my thought. What's your take on this first round here?
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and just in general with Tesla taking it, I thought that was just a huge step forward for this whole cycle, and just when everyone gets awoken to it, because I feel like in terms of I'm really into the technical charts of these bubble cycles of currency, and if you watch more of my videos, I'm predicting price action given previous market cycles. So the market of cryptocurrency is likely to go to 7 trillion based on prior trends. And I feel like I'm watching a simulation occur. How do we go from 200 billion to 7 trillion within a year? Well, you need Elon Musk to come out of the woodwork, and these people come out and legitimize it and create the speculation. And then the people are just, they're just making the charts come true on what told you was going to happen.
Yeah.
For me, as an investor, I am an adopter of Bitcoin Cash, but I'm an investor in the cryptocurrency in general, a speculator. Yeah. But yeah, that's the whole phenomenon that happening. But real quick, it's in small font. Do you mind reading me Spencer's reply?
Yeah, he says, when Bitcoin inevitably becomes a common unit of account, will you finally concede that you were wrong all along?
So Peter, that's all he's got left, right?
That's right. Exactly. Before he was able to say, look, it's not a medium of exchange because nobody's trading it for anything. But now that's happening. And then he was able to say, I guess it's not a store of value, but the fact is the value's been going up. So, since, maybe, recently it could be volatile, but he can't, he heard about it when it was $20. So now it's, 50,000 or 60,000. For as much as he loves the free market, he can't deny that the market is consistently voting against him on this one, right?
Yeah. And I thought Peter could have or should have loved it. Like you said, he did look at it when Eric talked about it in the early days. And, other economists like the late Milton Friedman talked about an internet cash and e-cash occurring one day. And, so I guess it's just Peter could have been a big person in human history in terms of economic thought if he was up front, and he's just still missing it. But maybe Spencer will be the one instead to be the great economist Schiff moving forward, because his dad was fantastic too. I love Peter's dad. He died a martyr. Are you familiar with Peter's father?
Yeah, it's his name was Erwin Schiff, I think, right? Or and he was in prison for some of what. I don't know all the great details, but yeah, I don't know where about.
He ended up being in prison.
Yeah,
and he just felt like the United States was unlawfully collecting his taxes, and he was being civilly disobedient and died in jail.
Yeah, that's it. So quite a family, quite the lineage here we have going on, and it's true. You can see some, the whole history of money playing out in this family, right? It's a fascinating story. So, all right, so we got round 2 now. Peter says, gold's decline on rising inflation data has nothing to do with Bitcoin. Hashtag gold isn't being sold because investors are hedging inflation with Bitcoin instead, but because they believe there's no need to hedge as a transitory rise in inflation will be contained by future rate hikes. So this is, this is Peter's bread and butter, right? He's always commenting on inflation and the Federal Reserve and their interest rates and all that sort of stuff. So Spencer comes back. This one's a bit more zinger. He's just got nice and simple TikTok, and then he's quoted this tweet from Documenting Bitcoin. It says, progress of Bitcoin becoming worth more than all the gold in the world. So 1.1 trillion out of 10.9 trillion, so 10%. And so that's really it. Like, even if Peter can sort of justify to himself that maybe on any given day that gold is completely disconnected from Bitcoin, in the abstract, he's just wrong, which is that younger investors, or any investors, even big banks now, they're ignoring gold to get Bitcoin. Like, I bought some precious metals. I bought some silver, like back in the day when I was learning all about this, and I thought, yeah. And then the more I thought about it, so I had some crypto, I had some precious metals, and the more I thought about it, I thought, I don't want precious metals though. I just would rather have more crypto. It's easier to store, it's easier to transport, it's more secure if you manage it properly, and it's going to be the future, so it's going to grow in value. Whereas with precious metals, it's the opposite. The use case for precious metals in terms of storing value has been essentially replaced by cryptocurrency. And in this case, it's just so well illustrated because Spencer literally is the investor that is ignoring gold to go with Bitcoin. And yet he says investors aren't ignoring gold to go with Bitcoin.
Yeah, I give that one to Spencer as well. And it's something I like to point out in terms of just any commodity in investing, but specifically gold and silver, is the opportunity to invest is when it's a horrible thing to mine, per se. Gold has been too profitable to mine for too many years now. And after the 2011 kind of spike in price, gold mines opening up everywhere. And they could easily fire any of them back up. So anytime if a demand were to spike, the supply is going to constrain it. It's not going to have huge price increasing. Where on the other hand, something like Bitcoin, where you have a halving cycle that kind of starts these bull cycles, it chokes the supply chain. And if demand just stays constant, price goes vertical. So it has this better mechanism in appreciating for value than waiting on the cyclical nature of a commodity to go into a bear cycle and then make it a horrible business. And then we have to overpay miners to go out to pull it out, which creates better price appreciation. And Peter, as a good economist, should know this. Like, supply and demand is going to drive value. And gold just doesn't have the fundamentals. Yeah. And on top of that, you have this new internet store of value and medium of exchange eating its lunch. So
yeah.
It's not a good combination.
I completely agree with you, and it's was sort of a genius move among many genius moves by Satoshi to put in that halving cycle, because it fuels these kind of manias and rallies, which obviously Bitcoin or cryptocurrency have been very known for. And while that's a negative thing in terms of a lot of people get burnt on the way up and the way down, there's just no way around that with everybody uncovering a new form of money and adapting it into society. That was always going to happen. But by having that, it's like, because Satoshi could have just made a straight line where it just went up at this constant rate, for however long until it got to the end. But instead, by having that issuance increasing at a decreasing rate, it provides those opportunities for those huge manias, which then bring so much attention and interest from the media and so on and so forth, and helps create that self-fulfilling cycle. Yeah,
I think that's what's helped create this massive network effect. This asset that's become a $1 trillion asset in 12 years, and then a few months later, a $2 trillion asset.
Yeah, exactly. It's just going to keep going up. So yeah, this is a solid 2-0 for Spencer, I think, at this point. On this point, he's got it right. Cryptocurrency is just inevitable, and it's just taking over gold, but Bitcoin can't see it. All right, so we got round 3. So Peter says, congratulates to my son, Spencer K. Schiff, on hitting 60K Twitter followers. I just wish he would go back to posting mostly insightful tweets about the US economy and financial markets, rather than mainly posting nonsense about Bitcoin. And Spencer, with a scorching reply here, says, thank you. I just wish you would only post tweets about the US economy and financial markets rather than nonsense about Bitcoin. And so this is just a clear 3-0 here for Spencer. This is like look, even if Peter is skeptical of Bitcoin, he can't deny that more and more often he is posting about it himself, whether it's because of his son or anything else, right? And Spencer just calls him out for that, and he also is just hitting on the key point, really, that Peter doesn't understand Bitcoin. So his commentary, even obviously we said he's researched it or he's tried using it a little bit, but he's kind of starting from a position where he wants to find that it's a failure rather than coming at it from an open mind. So of course, because he's got those preconceptions, he just doesn't get it, and I think, he would probably struggle to explain if you asked him, okay, at a technical level, how does a blockchain work? Like, he's not a coder, he doesn't know about that. Or if you asked him about a lot of the stuff I've covered on this show, right? Like in terms of how the adoption cycle happens and how, how it can spread as money or how it can go from not a currency to a currency, all those kind of things. Clearly he doesn't know about those, because if he did, he would be on the cryptocurrency train with all the other smart people in the world that are figuring it out. So, yeah.
I think it's almost like a marketing ploy, though, for Peter to stay relevant in the conversation, to be eccentric on the other side, and I don't know how it affects Europac's bottom line or his gold sales, but there has to be an audience for what he's saying, even though I don't know how people can look at the scoreboard and say, yeah, no, I'm going to go with Peter.
Yeah, well, that's right. I agree with you. I'm sure there is some sort of marketing angle to it. I mean, it sort of comes to this point about another reason that cryptocurrency is inevitable, is that it's an offer that is too good to refuse at a certain point, which is that for people like Spencer, like me, like you, like anybody, they've figured out that crypto is the future, and then the only logical thing to do once you understand that is to jump on board, and then you become part of the spreading it and advocating for it and so on and so forth, right? And so everybody should look at it and understand. So there is, I suppose, a market for being anti-cryptocurrency, but that's a market that is shrinking. Whereas the market for supporting cryptocurrency is constantly growing. The economy is constantly booming in terms of the amount of services, the amount of people that are interested, the amount of consumers that want to transact with it, and even just the intellectual market in terms of, Peter has gone from, okay, maybe he was on sort of the right side in the public's mind as, Bitcoin's a bubble or whatever, and the world is just slowly, the meter is just shifting away from him at a faster and faster rate until eventually you just become known as the person who is outdated and missed it. You just get ignored because it's like, all right, well, we've already decided your opinion's irrelevant. Like, moving forward, right? Okay, cool. So we've got here, finally, Peter gets a stab back in. I've got to, balance the conversation a little bit. I don't think Spencer has everything right. So we have here, Peter says, so far in 2021, Bitcoin has lost 90% of its value versus Dogecoin. This was at the peak of the Dogecoin mania recently. The market has spoken. Absolute zinger. Dogecoin is eating Bitcoin. All the Bitcoin pumpers who claim Bitcoin is better than gold because its price has risen more than gold's must now concede that Dogecoin is better than Bitcoin. And so Spencer comes back with, always zoom out. Bitcoin will outperform every shitcoin, including Dogecoin, over the coming years. So this one, Peter gets a hit in. Like, on this point, he's got Spencer beat, in my opinion, because obviously Bitcoiners love, or Spencer, has said about the price is appreciating versus gold, therefore that makes it superior. And obviously Peter can pick any of the other cryptos on any given week that are going up or down, and say, look, there you go, that's the same proof there. Then by your own logic, obviously these other cryptos are superior to Bitcoin. And so there's sort of a bit of a balance here, in the sense that Spencer is right that in the long run, if you look at the price, that is over a longer time frame, like over 10 years or 20 years maybe, the price is a pretty good indicator of what the market is voting for. But also in the short term, it doesn't matter. And so, being myself advocating for Bitcoin Cash, I will concede obviously that Bitcoin Cash is doing worse on price than Bitcoin, but I also don't think that's not the killer factor. It's not the price. And so Bitcoiners love to advocate for, we have the higher price, therefore we are the best, which is the same reason that they talk shit about gold. And while we were mentioning it before, yeah, it's one factor to consider. It's not the whole picture, though. So it is quite, quite a good jab there by Peter to say, look, if it's all about the price, we can obviously pick any different metric there.
Yeah, I think it plays into getting these people into the space, and then having the conversation about the block size, the history of it, the utility of it. Is off-chain solution the best way to go or not? And like how are we actually going to change the world with this technology? Which again, where I think Spencer loses here because he is being a Bitcoin maximalist. And yeah, I just wonder at what maybe the next market cycle we start seeing some big names, really switch their tone on it, and looking at the direction. We do see major institutions like Microsoft and PayPal, like Bitcoin Cash is in a lot of these areas where institutions do see it. I just don't understand. I don't understand Bitcoin maximalism in general. Like, what do you think is attractive to people about being Bitcoin maximalists?
Well, it's a weird one because it comes from some very solid history in one sense, which is that I've talked about on the podcast before, but if you rewind back to, let's say, pre-2014 or pre-2015 maybe, where the altcoin market was really booming, if you look back at that time, there was other cryptocurrencies, there was like Litecoin, obviously, and then Feathercoin and Namecoin and Primecoin and all these coins that have basically just faded out of existence, right? There was quite a market even in the early days for altcoins, but the thing about it was that Bitcoin was the main game. Like, it was 95% of the economy at least was there in terms of the market cap, all of the intellectual investment as well, all the adopters were there, all the projects were there, everything was just kicking off hardcore in Bitcoin. So that sort of split between the Bitcoin and altcoins goes back to those early days where at that time, I would have agreed. I would have been sort of more, Bitcoin is the one and only way, because it was about magnifying the network effect of having everybody on the same currency. And because there wasn't these problems with scaling and community grief and whatever, everybody was just on the same page and it was kicking off and it was great. Like, if we'd started at that time with 15 different currencies, competing, it probably wouldn't have gone so well. The reason that it was strong is because everybody was united. So despite being so small, I mean, now even cryptocurrency is still small, but it amazes me when I look back actually how fringe it was. But so that was, at that time, that was correct. But then the reason that when Ethereum was the first sort of major innovation in that Litecoin was an altcoin, but it didn't really add anything. But when Vitalik looked at this scaling and he said, look, okay, never mind, I'm going to start my own thing. And then he slowly started growing that and showing a different use case and everything like that. That sort of really started to put the digs in that it couldn't just all be about Bitcoin. It was going to be cryptocurrency as a movement. And then classically with the split from Bitcoin to Bitcoin Cash, well, that really just settles the argument, because it was going to be peer-to-peer electronic cash, Bitcoin Cash, electronic cash system in the white paper. So if Bitcoin's not going to be that, then you can't say, well, the whole thing is just Bitcoin, because something's got to be actually usable by people. It's called cryptocurrency, right? It needs to be a currency. At least one of them does. Otherwise, what are we doing here? So in that respect, the combination of the censorship at the time of the debate and the renewed focus on the investment angle rather than the currency tradability, angle, combined with there was already some sort of seeds of that which were correct, but in a different era, those two things sort of fused together to make what we now have, which is these really toxic maximalists that just deny there is any point to any other cryptocurrency. And somehow, like I said about the 90%, they understand crypto mostly, but they're still kind of missing a key element.
And they're not like nice about it, how do you try? I try to engage with Bitcoin maximalists too, and I try to be like, you're not going to. That's what, again, getting into, creating a brand, and what you're doing here is fantastic, the Bitcoin Cash podcast, but to like being able, like, again, like I always think back to like elections, like whoever is just throwing dirt at the other side ends up like looking worse, right? So I think in terms of, I don't know, getting it in people's hands, trying to create more of a network around it. And when they try to come in, a lot of times they'll try to call Bitcoin Cash a scam, because, we use the same white paper, Bitcoin.com endorses it, and they think they're misleading people into what Bitcoin is. And I'm just curious, you, someone else that's in this environment, how do you engage with that type of conversation?
Well, I think what you've got to understand is that it's from a very short-sighted kind of thing. That response is mostly driven by fear. The reason that Bitcoin people are that so maximalist in that sense is, like I said, back in the day, it was because everybody knew that it was better to have a stronger network effect. But nobody was hating on Litecoin or anything. Everyone was like, okay, well, Bitcoin's where the action is, but nobody was going out of their way to just, well, a little bit, but it wasn't like it is today, basically. And so, but for now, you don't see Bitcoin maximalists. They're not rabidly against like Bitcoin SV, for instance, or they have a specific hatred for Bitcoin Cash, basically, because it's a threat. And while they generally might also be like, Ethereum's kind of different or useless, or there's a lot of scams in cryptocurrency, which is something that everybody can sort of agree on. I
heard a funny joke, or Ethereum, like Ethereum, a great Ponzi scheme to launch other Ponzi schemes.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
And I like Ethereum. Don't get me wrong, but there is some truth to that.
That's right. And it is because the whole space, there's such a high delta between the scams and the future of the world currency. And there's also very low knowledge in the market in terms of people understanding all these things. That's part of like this podcast, right? So I'm hoping to sort of condense a lot of this down so that people can at least get to the bottom of all this, because it's nearly impossible without years in the space to understand all these different intricacies. And so in that sense, if people want to say, oh, Bitcoin Cash is a scam, whatever, I mean, mostly my attitude is to just ignore them, because either they can listen to this podcast, and I have episodes about BCH versus BTC, and they can listen to that and understand, like I did the debate of Dotcom versus BTC Maxis. I think that's a great episode.
That's great.
That you could link to people if they want to, because Kim does a great job of explaining, and then I sort of commented on some of the points that he made as well too. But basically, if you are a Bitcoin maximalist, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, because everyone can agree that 99% of the world doesn't really use crypto at this stage, and certainly like 99.9% doesn't use it for commerce. They don't trade it every day or buy their lunch with it or whatever. And so there's a huge pool, like an overwhelming pool of people who are basically undecided. If there was like green and orange, lights over people's heads, they've just got gray, where they have no decision or no investment either way. And those people are going to be so much more amenable to Bitcoin Cash, because like you said, it's a friendlier community. It's not all this toxic, I'm going to get rich instantly. A lot of people don't want to get rich instantly. Even if Bitcoin could do that for them, they're just not interested. For what they are interested, if they might be interested in the future of money or technology, or in, activism after a certain fashion, or whether they can do something, use a new app that they couldn't use before, that had money integration somehow, right? All those things, are going to sway them to Bitcoin Cash.
And looking for areas that it's useful. And for example, I told you I'm paying I use a graphic designer. I should probably look into this a little bit more, but he's in India, and I've been paying him on PayPal. I'm like, hey, you got fees here, this, that. Why don't you try this?
Yeah.
And then also, I live in Florida, and I'll sell some. I'm in the restaurant equipment business. I'll sell some things to people in the Bahamas or different islands. Like, oh, and like she wanted to add something to her order, and she's like, oh, I got to go to Western Union, this, that, wire. It's gonna take like a week. I was like, you could literally text me money in seconds. Like the fact that you're getting stressed about this is silly. So, looking for those opportunities to find it more and more useful is really important. And I wanted to add real quick, your commentary on Kim and just overall that dialogue with the Bitcoin maximalists, which all of us Bitcoin Cash people bringing people in are going to have to learn this. This dialogue is going to have to happen over and over again to turn over this huge network effect.
Yeah.
And the branding towards it. I think Kim's done such a good job of he stayed so calm in that. And again, he wasn't the one throwing stones at the other side. He was trying to have a civil discussion on this true revolutionary technology that's trying to scale for the world. Like at the end, that's what we're doing. It's not a religion, right? And I just really appreciated his demeanor. And I like having someone like that in this community where we're trying to create a positive brand, So
yeah,
wanted to add to what, and I'm glad Kim's here. I can't wait to see the what he's building. That's going to be very exciting for Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah,
I am.
Yeah, exactly, and we'll see. When that comes out later this year. That's an interesting point because it's not appreciated, I don't think, by especially newer converts to Bitcoin who are getting into it and their plan is everybody's going to buy this and I'm going to get rich, basically, is that they don't understand that if you wind back the clocks a little bit, the reason that Bitcoin became successful was because it had a super strong, passionate community who were innovating and delivering, making apps, making media, making all this sort of stuff, right? And that's how it got from where they'd never heard of it to they, were interested or they were convinced to buy it. Well, all those people have left, basically. There are some sort of still a little bit, but the early crypto adopters, and it's very hard for people who are newer to see this because they don't necessarily know who those people were, or they weren't, they didn't see that process of the innovation starting and everything. That has now moved to all the other coins, mostly to Bitcoin Cash and to Ethereum, basically. In my understanding, my perspective, that is where probably 70 or 80% of the most innovative, productive, different investors have gone to. But, to some other coins as well, there are different projects that they like, or maybe they even stopped doing as much cryptocurrency like Mike Hearn, or, people like that. So but the thing is, if you look at the coin value today, you're trying to invest in the one that's going to be good in the future, and things that are valuable take time to produce. Entrepreneurs and innovators, they don't just start up something then instantly it's a success, right? They have to spend a lot of time, they have to get it working, they have to release it, they have to market it, all that stuff. So what you need to be looking at is indicators in a coin today that those projects are starting and they'll probably be rolling in a year or in 2 years. And in Bitcoin now, there's just not really any of those projects. There's none of those people. The big people who are big influencers in that community, people like Michael Saylor or whatever, they're literally just hyping up the price. And the ones who are maybe more in the sense of going to be innovative or driving the currency forward, people like Elon Musk, he's not actually that strongly, he doesn't have a strong allegiance to Bitcoin. He's not in it for Bitcoin, even though he started with that, dipping his toes in the water a little bit. You can already see that he knows that this is cryptocurrency, it's for the world, all those kind of things. And he likes Dogecoin, right? So he's obviously clearly not a Bitcoin maximalist. And whatever projects or whatever stuff he cooks up, it's not going to be, this is going to give Bitcoin the edge against every other currency, because he's either going to make a project and have it accept Bitcoin and other currencies, or he might just think, actually, Bitcoin doesn't really work, so I'll do it with Bitcoin Cash, or I'll do it with Dogecoin, or, whatever his thoughts are.
Did you see, I'm trying to remember the name of his YouTube channel. He's doing a lot of Bitcoin Cash content, but the gentleman that told Elon he'll buy 111 Tesla Model 3s if he accepts it in Bitcoin Cash and puts it on his Twitter.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting marketing ploy. And it just, kind of like the nature of crypto, like Elon kind of being the troll he is, he could really pump up some Tesla sales by saying, yeah, if you buy X amount, I'll accept in your currency or what. But I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And he did interact with Kim and dialogue, acknowledging Bitcoin Cash's utility. So
yeah.
That was.
I think it's on his mind. He's going to come around to it eventually. I think that I'll buy 111 Teslas. That was a very interesting type of thing, because Does Elon really care about selling 111 Teslas? Yeah, probably he does. You know, I mean, he, on one hand, he is the richest person in the world or whatever, and so you would think he doesn't care about, like, you know, money. But if he didn't care about money, he could just stop running his companies and just retire onto an island, right? So he does want to, you know, increase his sales, and so, and it's just a bit of a gambit, right? Because it's like, here's the prawn on the end of the hook, like, you're gonna bite, you know. And it's clever because it's to Elon's benefit to take him up on that, not only because he could directly sell the Teslas and do that part of it, but also because obviously he knows that he's being baited to sort of shift the market. But he, you know, if he's going to do that, he can benefit himself. He can buy up a bunch of Bitcoin Cash before he makes that announcement as well too. So it's a
and I think the way I've been a fan of Elon for a long time. Tesla's my largest stock position. I drive a Model 3, and he, you know, but his real mission, if you want to connect with him, isn't necessarily money driven. It's you know, creating, you know, a multiplanetary species. So whatever way, if Bitcoin Cash can create more economic freedom for more people to be able to do that, and making Tesla a bigger company to make more resources for him to be able to do that, absolutely, he's interested. And just knowing. And there was one day he put a fork in his Twitter profile, and I was like, "Oh my God, is he gonna say something about Bitcoin Cash?" Shortly after he was making they announced Tesla adding Bitcoin to the balance sheet and things like that. So
yeah,
I think it's inevitable for them to accept it. You know, I think that they're going to have issues. I'm sure people are trying to pay with it, and you know, transactions taking hours and customer complaints. I mean, Elon's a smart guy. Yeah. I think he'll find.
Yeah. I've said before on this show as well. Like, yeah, I think so. I mean, there was even just on their support website, you know, they have some commentary there about what are the different Bitcoin forks and like what is Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin. Like, it's on their mind, and there's been a bit of back and forth in previous episodes. Maybe I'll link them in the description or something, where I talked about, look, we found that they put up these descriptors and they took them down, and then they changed it and then they put them back up. Like, there was obviously conversations going on internally about how do we handle this, or how do we manage it.
So, you know? who like, obviously it was like Michael Saylor was a large influence on Elon there. Like, who is it from the Bitcoin Cash community that, like, I feel like they're going to want to speak to someone? And I feel like, you know, having Bitcoin.com as a place to go is very useful to courting not only Tesla but all these future, you know, large companies, and helping create a larger platform for Bitcoin Cash and whatever other resources we can have to build the community here. But,
yeah, I mean, I think you know, maybe Kim or maybe Roger can talk to him at some point. I don't know. I mean, obviously, yeah, people want to talk to someone big, but I think to me it's more about, you know, the way you convince someone of something is for them to get interested themselves, right? You don't want to go to them with a sales pitch, blah, 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 all this stuff, right? People are just instantly kind of off-put by that. Instead, my approach is like the opposite of, like I said in that previous episode where I was talking about proof of passion and things like that, is if we can create enough of a community drive and momentum, Elon, just like everybody else in the world, will see that happening. And he'll probably see it faster than most people too. And he'll clue in that this is where the action is. And then he will find those people himself. And then that solves the problem, because he will find whoever he trusts, you know, to get him that information. So that's where I think the game plan should be for the currency. Is we should be like internally focused. We should be making Bitcoin Cash amazing, and that will just attract other people rather than necessarily spreading it so much. I don't know.
I agree. I agree with that. Awesome.
All right, cool. So just back to this debate then of Peter and Spencer Schiff. So having talked over a few of their points there, that you know, they both had sort of some relevant points on either side. I've got my section where I'm going to give my opinion on what each of them could do to really just pull ahead in this debate. So if either of them watches this this podcast, here is how you get the upper hand. So for Peter, what he really needs to do is read up a bit more on crypto, right? He's always trying to assess cryptocurrency based on the metric of gold, rather than on the metric of the fundamentals of money or the trend. So really what he needs to do is start, and he's sort of done this a little bit with his Dogecoin, comparisons, is he needs to realize, look, the key things for cryptocurrency are things like the fee structure that drives away users, whether it's being adopted for real commerce, the development team, right? Gold doesn't have a development team, but cryptos do, and it's massively important. So he's got to be thinking in those mindset, and that's a huge weakness of BTC, is that their development team got basically captured by a corporate, company, and that they then started making bad moves,
You mentioned that earlier, not having much exciting development, but it's Blockstream, right? I mean, that's and to me the figurehead, or Andrew what's his name? Antonopolous? How do you pronounce that?
Antonopolous, yeah, Andreas, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he seems to be out there still pushing lightning. I see him on Twitter talking about Q&As about it, and I don't. He's kind of. I haven't heard last. I feel like last bull cycle he was everywhere. I don't see him out, and I just don't see him. What are your thoughts on him?
Well, yeah, I mean I'd love to talk to him about it. I don't know if we would necessarily see eye to eye on a lot of things, but he was huge for the crypto community in 2013, 2014, 2015, even 2016. He was so with it. He had so many great talks where he was just talking about it's Bitcoin Cash. Well, I guess he didn't say it's Bitcoin Cash, but he said it's Bitcoin where we're going global. It's going to be feeless. It's going to be banking the unbanked, right? That was his whole thing. We're spreading it to everyone in the world. It's innovative. It's a platform that's going to grow and expand and all this kind of stuff. But obviously, at some point, he changed his tune completely. If you put some of his
and I think I saw one speech he was making. He's just like, pretty much I went with consensus. I went with price, and if that changes, he will change.
Okay, well, that's an interesting angle on it. I do feel like he's got himself into a bit of a rut now because he's doubled down on Bitcoin and therefore has attracted a lot of those people who are in that sort of BTC maximalist crowd that we were talking about. So now if he did some content about some different cryptos, he's done a little bit about Ethereum because that's kind of tangential, so he can sort of weave it in there. But I feel like if he changed his mind and sort of started saying about Bitcoin, his comment section would just blow up with toxicity, and so he sort of put himself in the wrong incentive structure where actually coming back to real peer-to-peer electronic cash is going to backfire on him a little bit. So I think he's sort of trying to find out how he can sort of dance away from that a little bit, because he's in that position, and I think he's smart enough that he will see the writing on the wall as Bitcoin Cash grows in prominence. I mean, he's got a lot of stuff about the Lightning Network and everything like that, but I mean, he should know that it's not really working. I think he's smart enough for that, but Who knows? Who knows? And this is the same thing as Spencer, right? So for him, what he needs to do to get ahead of his dad and just really put in the knockout blow is he needs to read up on Bitcoin Cash. He could watch my podcast or something, maybe understand the history a little bit more, and then he could just live in the crypto economy. That's where he would just absolutely, there would be no coming back from that. With his dad, where if he can be hyping Bitcoin and saying crypto is the future and all this sort of stuff, but as we have talked about, it's not really usable. Like day to day, people are not trading it for lunch basically. And if he figured out that, wait a second, this is what the whole point of cryptocurrency actually was, to be a currency, and he got into Bitcoin Cash, he could just get a couple of his friends to start using it and just start buying his lunch. Peter's like sitting there at the kitchen table, and his mate comes in and they've just bought some beers or whatever, he pays him back in Bitcoin Cash right there in front of him. That is the ultimate proof. There's no debate about that. Is it money or is it not? Once you see it happening in front of you, that's it. It's game over. So that's what Spencer has to do. He has to sort of somehow he saw past all Peter's preconceptions and everything about crypto to get into Bitcoin. He's got to see past that maximalist stuff to get into Bitcoin Cash and then just start using it as money. And so the problem there is, in the short run, obviously his dad would say, oh, well, so yesterday it was Bitcoin, today it's Bitcoin Cash, tomorrow it'll be something new, and kind of make this argument that it's just shifting his position. But in the long run, that would be the killer blow. That would just settle the debate, basically, whether or not they're having a Twitter debate. If Spencer just starts posting, just paid my mate back in Bitcoin Cash, like, how's that not money? Question mark. That's it. That's the end of discussion, really. So, I mean, both of them. That's why I said, that they were 90% there or 90% not there. Is that both of them, their position falls apart a little bit. If Bitcoin Cash, follows my prediction and rises up to regain, its spot as the #1 crypto. So, I mean, for Spencer, it's sort of that same position of how painful will it have to get before he sort of thinks maybe I'm missing something, right? Like, if Bitcoin Cash, it was 118 to 1, now it's 67 to 1. If it gets to 30 to 1 or 5 to 1 or 2 to 1, or 1 to 1, at what point will he think, maybe I should look into this, maybe there's something going on. And then for Peter, if that happened, he can sort of say, look, Bitcoin's a failure, I told you all, which would be pretty disingenuous because it completely ignores that Bitcoin Cash is the Bitcoin that he was criticizing in 2012, basically. But, that I'm sure he will try and claim that as a moral victory, even though, I mean, the reality is that he's just becoming increasingly off the pace as crypto becomes a real currency with Bitcoin Cash. So, I will tag them in the tweet when I release this episode, and either of them are very welcome on the podcast. Either Peter to, debate gold versus Bitcoin Cash, or Spencer, Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash. Absolutely happy to have either of them on for a chat about that. So that
would be epic. I would love
that would be cool. I mean, like I said, I think both of them, they're so close to understanding, but just in slightly different areas. So if they have any interest in that would be definitely a cool chat. So one other thing I just wanted to touch on with you, I don't know how long you want to go for. Usually these episodes are like sub 2 hours, but we can, carry on as long as you got time for, is to, just talk to you about crypto content creation. Obviously, I'm now getting into this scene a little bit. I'm pretty new, and give me some advice. How did you get into YouTubing? What's, the successful stuff you found, and how did it all go?
Yeah, so I was kind of prefacing it before. What I'm doing now is I want to be a part of the narrative in the Bitcoin Cash community, and there's room. There's enough interest in the project where they need you, they need me, they need others to come into the space and spread the word in terms of what it is. I got into YouTube. Actually, my wife actually has a pretty big YouTube channel. She has about 70,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
And she does she makes a good living off it, and I have a small business, and but I've always had a passion towards economics, cryptocurrency, and investing in general. So I find it makes me, and you're going to find this with you, especially you're very well versed in Bitcoin Cash, but it helped me become a better investor. I'm not going to come out and make a video and sound like a total babbling idiot, right? I'm going to be firm. I'm going to understand what I'm talking about. And I went to school to be a teacher, and they always said, your students will learn more if you have them teach the content back.
Yeah.
So for me, that was very powerful, and it has really helped extrapolate my gains as an investor, and it's given me just something, again, that passion to follow my passions, to cover things like Bitcoin Cash, to cover, a couple of years ago I was investing in a Tesla and things like that. So I think those are very important things. I think you've done an amazing job branding yourself, having this name, the Bitcoin Cash Podcast. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And like any business, continuing investing back in it, like we were talking about before, like always trying to get into better production and things like that, which I always need to do as well. I could have done better today, maybe with the lighting and all that, but I got
good, man.
I got my kids running around the house, so I figured I spare you the noise. But yeah, that's kind of my background, my story. And I got to say, out of everything I've covered on YouTube, there's something very cool about the Bitcoin Cash community. They're very passionate. My videos have all done, pretty well, and especially in relevance to other videos that I've made. There's a lot of interest behind it, and just, getting an opportunity to broadcast the revolution, the cryptocurrency revolution, is one that, when we talk to our grandkids when we're older, what were we doing during this time? Well, we were spreading the good word about currency and Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah.
So I think legacy is important with it too, somewhat, in terms of being a part of it. When my wife first started out, before she made one video. So Ryan, I think I want to do a YouTube channel, and like the idea of like going on camera, it just wasn't her personality, all that, or she didn't think so. I was like, what's the worst could happen? You could get some footage of you younger that we could show our kids when they're older. Like what's the worst thing that could possibly happen? And the best thing that happened is she has a thriving business that makes way more than she made in her working career. And so it was a no-brainer. But
yeah,
that's
great to hear. I think for me, really, I mean, I was surprised when I started this podcast. It was just because obviously nothing's official in cryptocurrency, right? I love Rick Falkvinge has a great ideas about everybody just has whatever title they want, right? So it was just I've done a lot of businesses and different things in my life that I was trying to make work, but really what I stumbled on was that a lot of stuff I was trying to do, nobody was really that interested. But now people are interested in crypto, and so because I've been in it that whole time, and I didn't even realize. I kind of wish I'd started this podcast in 2013. I was trying to talk to each individual person and telling them, hey, listen, let me tell you about this or that or whatever. But I didn't realize, look, just do it at scale, right? And the thing is, the difference there is that with the podcast, people who are interested can listen, rather than me finding, okay, are you interested? God, I spent half an hour trying to explain this to you. You weren't interested, right? Like someone else, right? So it took a very long time for those light bulbs to switch on in my head. But once it did, I mean, it's been a pretty natural thing. And I encourage, everybody in the community, anybody who's listening, basically crypto combines with pretty much anything. That's one of the great things about it as well too. It can be, you could have a channel if you were about politics and you could use crypto as an example, or if it was about psychology and about the investing of crypto, or if it's about obviously economics and finance, if it's about technology, it could be about that. If it was about fashion, there's going to be a huge industry of people wearing stuff that is branded to different cryptos, that they're supporting, money being now a choice, like a fashion statement. Like even with NFTs, you can sort of see that. Like a lot of different things. Any industry you can imagine. You could be the first niche of Bitcoin Cash, artist or painting, or it could be anything. So like we see, exactly. So people, those niches are open, like you're saying, and the whole ecosystem just snowballs on itself. So anybody who needs some ideas or things, if they're passionate about the currency, find a way to get involved. I've got here on the slide, like maybe organize a debate at your university or at your high school or whatever, and just find someone who's skeptical and just say, look, debate me on crypto. And they probably don't know much about it, so they'll have to read up. You'll obviously read up, the crowd will come along, and just find a way to make it fun, and I think that's how it's going to kick off, really.
Yeah. I saw you had a Marc de Mesel tweeted you out. Did you see that?
I think he's retweeted me at some point. Yeah, I would like to have him as a guest on the show. I've been meaning to line that up, but I thought first I had to get, you know, he's got a lot on his plate, right? I don't want to waste his time. So I've been building up, you know, my content and my, you know, ability to run the show successfully and stuff first. Yeah.
Absolutely. I really look forward to watching that. Mark's been, I found Mark during the last bull run, and he was, you know, finally, like, I feel like there weren't enough voices or platforms, you know, talking about Bitcoin Cash. And in terms of going back to what you were saying, like, when you dip your foot into it, you realize, like, wow, there's so much demand here. Like, I need to be here. We need more people to be here. Like, the market, it's just occurring, and we need to materialize and be the people to have the discussions. And I think it's amazing. And yeah, I think I see Mark getting around. I've never, I don't really do back and forth, but he's always friendly to dialogue. Very smart guy, really interesting person too. And it's but he's big for the Bitcoin Cash space. You know, he's definitely his heart's into it, and I think he's a big proponent. He fuels a lot of that money into Noise.cash. Is that correct?
Yeah. And Read.cash as well. Yeah, he's doing great stuff, and I'll at least ask him, you know, to come on for an episode of the podcast. I always try and theme it with, you know, the guest as to what their like specialty would be. So I think for him, it's a lot about the investment kind of angle, I think, as well. Obviously, he at a very high level as well too. He sort of understands where you've got to put work back into your investments to make them good, and a lot of those things. So I would have to cook up some kind of topic or theme around that too. And it would be pretty sick to get him on the show as well too.
Awesome.
All right, cool. So let's just move on. So I have here. So like you're saying about that community dialogue, are really just trying to create a bit more of a flow back and forth. And I feel like content creators, you know, such as yourself, would be are really good to comment on these kind of things, because they are very, you know, in touch with the community, because you see the comments every day on your YouTube videos, or you have a sense of the flow of what's happening. So yeah, here's like a community comment, and I guess you can put in your thoughts. But somebody asked about, what does our BTC think about Hal Finney's take on Bitcoin's future being high-powered money that serves as reserve currency? This guy here, Captain Roger Murdoch, says, it misses the mark. The entire purpose of money is to reduce transactional friction. The best form of money is thus the one that does this most effectively, including A, reducing the friction associated with finding a transacting partner by having a huge network effect or being widely held and accepted. B, reducing the friction associated with making an individual transaction by being fast, cheap, and reliable. And C, reducing the friction associated with holding money between transactions by having a predictable finite supply. It's true that there will always be a natural balance between money proper, i.e. in Bitcoin's case on-chain transactions, and various and necessarily imperfect money substitutes, whether those take the form of traditional fully custodial banking networks or a semi-custodial banking system like the Lightning Network. The problem with an arbitrary and increasingly inadequate limit on the capacity of the former is that it distorts that balance. And that's what actually threatens security and decentralization by forcing the vast majority of transactions to occur on inherently less secure and less decentralized second-layer solutions. I think the analogy of an inverted pyramid is useful here for intuiting the fundamental problem. The smaller your base is relative to all the layers built on top of it, the more precarious the whole structure becomes. So that kind of gets to what we were talking about, Lightning Network, and about you know, even to some extent the dispute between Bitcoin Cash, and gold, you know, as to being money in the long run. You need a network effect, but also having those lower friction will ultimately, you know, value will flow into those lower friction avenues.
Yeah, I wish we almost had like a third party on the show right now, Bitcoin maximalist, and just heard that, and like where's I want to hear what they'd have to say back to that. I'm very fascinated to, you know, like to me and you, like I feel like, you know, we get it, we're at that moment with it, but you know, I want to hear a debate back. What am I missing? You know, how like the goal is to be frictionless, low fee. You know, like I always like to pitch, you know, you can send any amount of money to anyone in the world for a fraction of a penny, and no one can stop it. Like that is the core value that it's really only alive in Bitcoin Cash, you know, and I think that's what made Bitcoin what it was. And like I always say, like Bitcoin would not be
what it is if they just said, "Oh, we're going to be this slow, high fee store of value coin." Like they would have never have been able to create the phenomenon we know it is.
Yeah.
And today, what does that mean? I don't know. But in terms of like, what is that? What it took to get it here, and will it be the store of value, the store of gold? Maybe. Like we're talking a lot about, Knox against Bitcoin, BTC. But do you think it will be this reserve currency in terms of store value, or how do you see this playing out? Will it be a digital gold? Can these two Bitcoins versions coexist?
I mean, I actually think no, but with some sort of caveats. So the problem with this sort of Bitcoin is going to be digital gold is that it's reasoning by analogy, which is it's sort of taking, it's like Peter Schiff, has this problem of trying to think about what is already there and then thinking that the new thing, when you have a paradigm shift, the whole point of a paradigm shift is that you can't reason by analogy to the previous things. Because if you could, it would just be a minor upgrade or a remix or something. But if it's literally a new fundamental step forward, you need to have a whole shift in mindset to get over that barrier. And so digital gold is a very backwards looking way of thinking about it, that we have gold and that banks were holding that and therefore they will want to hold something in the future. Well, that would be cryptocurrency. Instead, the narrative should be going the other way, which is that in a world where you have cryptocurrency, especially like Bitcoin Cash, which can be fast, reliable, and can have essentially security, at an institutional grade level by educated individuals holding their money themselves, in that world, what is the use for gold? Well, like we talked about, probably not that much. Therefore, what is the use of Bitcoin? Also, probably not that much. So in the short term, yes, Bitcoin can be a sort of digital gold, or banks, again, because they're very predisposed to this reasoning by analogy, something they already understand, it will help them shift from, not having any crypto to having some crypto. That's a narrative that can be sold to them. But ultimately, if you have these 10 or 20 banks or, a few world governments or whatever holding some Bitcoin in a vault, then that's fine. But really, people are going to be just trading Bitcoin Cash on the street. And then they're going to go to the bank. And why would you ever, like I talked about, why would you ever go to the bank and say, hey, can I deposit some of my Bitcoin Cash, which I use and works fine and is great, for this other thing, Bitcoin, which is just going to cost me a lot of money to put it into, and then I can't trade it anywhere. I'm going to have to just pay another massive amount of money to get it out into Bitcoin Cash, but I've already got what I want, So in the medium term, yeah, Bitcoin can probably be a digital gold or whatever, but in the long run, the point is, even just that phrase, digital gold, it's already wrong. Digital things, it's called cryptocurrency. It's not called digital gold. Like, it's a new thing. It's a new asset class, and the world has obviously struggled with that. Because financial professionals and people don't know what to make of it when they first come across it. Because is it a stock? Is it a commodity? Is it a currency? It's kind of like a government currency, but not really. But nobody's really trading it, but they might, and just everything like that, right? It's literally created a new category, and in that new category, Bitcoin is fairly irrelevant in a world where you have Bitcoin Cash, especially if there's a hash rate flip. Like, Bitcoin Cash has been able to survive as a minority hash rate, but Bitcoin, maybe not, with a 2-week difficulty adjustment. If Bitcoin Cash takes off, and if everybody's trading Bitcoin Cash, there would be no reason to have Bitcoin.
Fascinating.
Just my take. All right, so we've got meme of the week just as we wind down for the end of the show. So this one comes from @Kurt Wuckett Jr. on Twitter, and he just made this meme picture of the MasterCard logo, which is the red and orange circle, and they just put the Bitcoin in the orange circle. I was like, simple and effective. Like, that's just what it is. The banks, and this is now the bank coin. That's what I've been saying. I love that. So sometimes just a picture tells 1,000 words. That just gets right to the heart of the matter. Right there.
So do you think that, like, in terms of being the bank coin, like, is it now, like, maybe, and this is me being conspiracy for a second, Like, has the bank been able to get control of Bitcoin, make it not a competitive currency on chain, slow it down, sluggish, stop it there, and then now they want to push off chain, right? So people going back and forth in a way. And to me, I go back, and it sounds like the gold story when you're pegging to something, going off chain, going back and forth with paper IOUs of this store value. Yeah. Then all of a sudden, what you were IOUing just disappeared, and you were back to going back and forth with just the paper, and then it became kind of funny money in a way. Like, is that the goal? Like, to be conspiracy, could this be a goal of a way where the financial system doesn't have this outright war against crypto, but kind of comes in within and takes what the people perceive as valuable and control it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's pretty much, you just hit the nail on the head. I agree 100%. Right? Is that was the history of money, and that's funny. That's why, again, both Peter and Spencer Schiff, neither of them have clicked on this. That the gold was great and it had all the right properties and stuff, but it was too inconvenient to hold yourself, and especially in the digital age, that's obviously not going to cut it, where people need to do commerce on the internet and everything. So the genius, well, like I said, there's a lot of genius aspects, but obviously Satoshi had the right mentality of completely flipping the security model from being, institutions holding on your behalf, which was the central point of failure that previous currencies had always collapsed under if they were trying to compete with the dollar, and turning it to individuals, and therefore, the nodes and the actual holders of the currency, that you've decentralized the control to those individual people. And that is what has happened with Bitcoin. Was the banks looked at it, they tried to find every different way in to sort of attack it, or to make it irrelevant, or say it was a scam or whatever. But after enough years of saying it's a scam and it hadn't gone away, that wasn't working. So they needed to try something different. So what did they figure out? Oh, well, okay, well, maybe we can sort of nudge the community in the direction that they aren't all just trading Bitcoin peer-to-peer, and that, again, we just put in some nice intermediate layers as the fees get more and more expensive. Like, I probably can even see that maybe some people are using Lightning and maybe it works great for them. And then you say to them, yeah, but that's not really decentralized. And they say, no, it is decentralized because you're using all these hubs and whatever. And you say, okay, but what if I want to settle with you on the blockchain? And they say, like, they can't reconcile those two things, where they, on one hand, they say Lightning is great and it all works fine and stuff, but you can also use the blockchain as well. And then you say, but can you? Because it will cost $20 to settle your 10-cent fee, so you're never going to do that. Aren't you captured? And then they say, no, that's just, it melts down. There's no comeback to that, right? So they say, no, but we've got Lightning, so we don't need the blockchain. You're kind of like, well, now you're going in circles, right? If you can't settle on the chain, like I said before, payment channels, it's maybe not even a terrible idea. I can see a world where on Bitcoin Cash, I made the Bitcoin Cash podcast. I streamed it live. Everybody deposited $5 on some wallet, and then for every 1 second, I got paid, 0.001 cent. And the longer the podcast went on, or the more people that were watching, I was getting paid literally sort of like per click for ads, except per second for live content production, right? That could be a great use for payment channels, that kind of thing. You wouldn't necessarily need to do thousands of on-chain transactions. You could find a way to bundle them all up. But that only works in a system where if one party tries to fraud the other, you can just settle on-chain for 1 cent and it's not a big deal, right? If it's going to cost $100 to settle on-chain, I'm not going to dispute somebody trying to scam me out of $10 on the Lightning Network.
These conversations need to be had, and I don't think you're going to find them on any Bitcoin maximalist conversation.
Yeah. No, so it's good. Yeah. It's been great having you on, man. So yeah, that really comes down to, okay, so just final thoughts, I want to create that back and forth dialogue from the community in terms of the community comments, and then also, from people in the community such as yourself. We've already talked about it a little bit, but do you have anything that you specifically want to, highlight, or any story you have for people, or advice or criticism? Where are we going wrong? What can we do different? Anything?
Yeah. Well, one, just thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. I love what you're doing here. And what I want to make sure, and I think Bitcoin Cash will be most successful, at least the way I'm talking about it. I'm not, and I fall guilty of it sometimes too. It's not always about the way we bring over where the majority of the value is right now is in terms of the cryptocurrency market is the Bitcoin crowd. When people first come into crypto, it's Bitcoin, right? But how do we attract them to look at us too? We have to be careful in the tone that we that we deal with Bitcoin, even though it's there was that war, there was that fork, but if we have the right fundamentals, and we really believe we do, having a positive image rather than just always throwing negativity at Bitcoin, I think will help bring more people over. And but a lot of people don't realize what I do try to explain to them, because people have gotten upset with me about like being critical of Bitcoin. But I was like, literally, if we can flip the hash rate, we are Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's right.
So when you try to say I don't have a legitimate claim to saying we're Bitcoin, dig a little bit deeper. I understand however you want to read the white paper. That's fair. And we talked about Ethereum, and even Vitalik Buterin at the time of the fork said we had a legitimate claim to the Bitcoin name and people that's prominent. So I think so. Hold on to the Bitcoin brand that we have and the association there, but just talking about how it can really empower people's lives, like talking about the real end user experience. Get Bitcoin Cash in as many people's hands as possible, and that'll evangelize them, and try Bitcoin, like you said, try both, and I don't think it's hard to figure out from there, and that's what brought me to the road and to the Bitcoin Cash camp, and I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to be in this network with you, and I'm excited to see how we look back on this conversation in years, and where we're at in terms of market cap, and I find it silly that we slip out of the top 10, but the market can be wrong, and the price, like you said, what Peter said, price is not always indicative of what's going on, and any investor knows that, any value investor. So looking at the real fundamentals and looking at the networks and the transactions that are taking place and the wallets that are opening and the businesses that are being built on top of it, it's really a neat community. And if anyone wants to check out my channel, I'll comment in the description below, and we can dialogue more. And again, thank you so much for having me on, Jeremy. I appreciate it.
Yeah. No, it's been great having you, and absolutely, we'll link to all your stuff. People can follow you on noise.cash, send you a little, couple of cents there, get those transactions flowing as well. And I think on that theme, try and be nice to the BTC crowd for the most part. I mean, I understand there's a lot of animosity there and so on and so forth, but what you got to understand is that for most people who are into BTC out there in the community, they're literally just suffering from ignorance, right? They don't know the history. They don't know. All they see is I'm invested in Bitcoin, and Bitcoin Cash is a scam. Like that's it's threatening their investment. So they're very dug into that and invested in that. But people do switch their point of view if you just calm with them and you just explain. And if they're not calm, well, that's fine. Just let them go, because at the end of the day, like I said, 99.9% of people, the conversation, you're not coming to somebody who is already entrenched on one side or the other. And those people, you can just explain to them and they just go, oh, okay, right, cool, interesting. That was how it worked. So yeah, a combination of those two approaches, I think is definitely ideal. So yeah, that's pretty much the end of the show then. Thank you for coming on, man. It's been great. People can donate as per usual. The slides and resources will be up at bitcoincashpodcast.com. The RSS and audio feeds are available as well. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Shout outs, anything you want to shout out at the end there? I don't know, like Noise.cash, Twitter feed, YouTube, whatever. I guess we'll just put it all in the description.
Yeah, we'll have it all linked in the description. I'm on all those platforms. And yeah, I think we covered a large breadth of things in the cash community. It would be cool if Spencer and Peter see their name in the description, and and possibly Spencer will watch this. Spencer he's on all the major platforms yet, so
yeah.
Hearing him talked about and beating up his father. So, but yeah, no, thank you so much for having me on. I'll link it all there below. I post a YouTube video weekly, investing related, and the channel is getting branded more and more towards Bitcoin Cash, and we'll see how that moves forward in the future. I may end up making 2 channels because I do have other passions in terms of entrepreneurship and all that. But and yeah, and if you don't have any Bitcoin Cash, I've been giving out Bitcoin Cash. So people have been generous to my channel, have donated, and I just really feel like the best thing to do for people is to get it into people's hands, and that's going to create the network effect. So if you don't have any Bitcoin Cash, DM me on Instagram, rgiffen89, and I'll send you some Bitcoin Cash over there.
Yeah, absolutely. Just give it a go and see for yourself, because that is the ultimate debate tool. Like I said, it just overrides everything. You see it in front of yourself. There's just no denying it at that point. So yeah, thank you to all the listeners, and until next time.
He pulled out his laptop and bring up the site, looked at me and said, this will change your whole life. Then he started explaining the basics to me. The miners make money by taking a fee every time a transaction is made and complete, and they work every minute and day of the week. A guy named Satoshi created this all. He's the mastermind of it, the brain and the balls. There's a lot more to say, but before I begin, just tell me right now if you're out or you're in.